Let me ask you something that might sound simple, but carries quiet depth. When was the last time you truly felt your birthday? Not just noticed it, or replied to messages out of habit, but really felt it, deep down, the way your heart used to race when you were a child, waiting for balloons, cake, and everyone's attention for that one special day back. Then it felt magical. You didn't care about being judged or pretending to be humble. You just existed in that moment, glowing with excitement. But somewhere along the road, adulthood changed that. The same date arrives and leaves quietly. You wake up, see a few notifications, maybe get a call from your mum, and then move on. You tell yourself it's not a big deal. You say you don't celebrate. You say it's just another day, but is it really? Because beneath that calm and casual tone hides a quiet story. It's not that people who say, "I don't care about birthdays," are cold or emotionless. In truth, they're often the most reflective ones. They've just learned to protect their hearts from the sting of unmet expectations psychologically. Birthdays are emotional mirrors. They don't just mark time. They reflect how you feel about being alive, how comfortable you are with being seen, and how much space you give yourself to feel visible. When someone says, "I don't care about my birthday," it can mean two things. One, they've reached a level of inner peace where external validation doesn't define them. Or two, they've been disappointed so often that they've trained themselves not to hope. There's a difference between emotional maturity and quiet withdrawal. And birthdays tend to reveal which side we're leaning towards. Some people genuinely outgrow the excitement of birthdays, not out of sadness, but because they've found meaning in ordinary days. They don't need a specific date to celebrate life. Every cup of coffee, every quiet evening, every deep conversation feels like its own kind of birthday for them. Joy has become an everyday companion, not a once-a-year visitor. But for others, birthdays are quietly complicated. They stir memories, emotions, and expectations all at once. Maybe birthdays remind them of the times they felt unseen or forgotten. Maybe they used to care deeply, only to end up hurt when no one cared back. So they built emotional armor. They stopped hoping out loud. They turned excitement into indifference and told themselves that it's easier not to expect anything that's not apathy. It's protection disguised as calmness. Psychologists call this emotional self-protection. When you've been let down repeatedly, your brain adapts. It lowers the bar. It tells you not to get your hopes up because disappointment hurts more than dullness. So you teach yourself to stop expecting. You stop counting hours to midnight. You stop waiting for a surprise. Because you've learned it's safer not to. It's strange, but that kind of emotional shielding can actually be a sign of intelligence. The brain values stability over excitement, especially when excitement has often led to pain. But there's a cost to that safety over time. The same walls that protect you start to isolate you. You walk through your own life like a polite guest watching from the sidelines, while the child inside you still waits quietly for a stick hand. The truth is, even when we say we don't care, most of us still check. We notice who remembered, we notice who didn't message, who didn't call, who forgot completely. We pretend not to care, but deep down we all do, because caring is human. Pretending not to care is just another way of caring. This quiet habit has a name: to avoidant validation behavior. It's when you convince yourself you don't need recognition only because part of you fears not receiving it. It's a survival skill often learned by those who grew up believing their emotional needs were inconvenienced. So when someone treats their birthday like an ordinary day, it's rarely about indifference. It's often about peace or protection, sometimes both. They've traded excitement for control, but that control always hides a soft truth underneath. No matter how composed we act, we all still want to be seen, not for achievements or grand gestures, but for existing, for simply being here. That's the real psychology behind birthdays. They're not about cake or candles. They're about acknowledgement, the subtle reminder that our existence matters, and even if we pretend not to care, the heart always does, quietly, faithfully. There's something almost poetic about the way we stop celebrating ourselves as we grow older. When we were kids, our birthdays meant everything. They were proof that the world saw us, that we mattered. For a day, but somewhere between growing responsibilities and quiet disappointments, we lost that spark. We stopped expecting celebration and started calling it maturity. But is it really maturity, or is it emotional exhaustion? For many people, birthdays aren't sad, they're heavy. They carry a strange kind of emotional weight, not because of age, but because of memory. Maybe a part of you still remembers a time when the day felt magical. Maybe another part remembers the year when it didn't, when someone forgot, when the silence was louder than the wishes. That's when the shift begins. You tell yourself it doesn't matter, but deep down, it always does. See, birthdays aren't just dates on the calendar. They're emotional checkpoints. They ask silent questions you can't ignore. How have you changed this year? What have you lost? What have you gained? Are you proud of who you're becoming? Sometimes those questions feel uncomfortable because the answers aren't always what we hoped for. That's why some people stop celebrating. It's not because they're cold. It's because reflection takes over excitement. They start to use the day as a mirror rather than a party. Psychologists call this temporal self-awareness. It's that quiet realization that another year has passed and you're still figuring things out. It's not sadness, it's honesty. Honesty can feel lonely because when you start seeing your birthday as a mirror, you can't hide from the reflection. You see the distance between who you wanted to be and who you are. You see the dreams still waiting, the versions of yourself you've outgrown, and the ones you've yet to meet. It's not about regret, it's about awareness. You become aware of time, aware of growth, aware of your own story in a way that feels both grounding and fragile. For some, this awareness feels freeing. They celebrate differently now. Maybe they take a long walk alone, cook their favorite meal, or spend time doing something that feels like peace. Their celebration isn't loud, but it's genuine. It's less about noise and more about meaning. But for others, birthdays awaken something tender, a soft ache that sits quietly beneath the surface. They scroll through old messages, remember people who used to be there, and notice who isn't anymore. Not out of bitterness, but out of longing, because birthdays have a way of reminding us who stayed, who drifted, and who never cared as much as we thought. And yet this ache doesn't mean weakness, it means being human. It means your heart still remembers what it feels like to be seen. Even if you say you don't need it, there's also a cultural shift in how we handle this. In childhood, birthdays connect us to belonging. They tell us we're part of something bigger, but in adulthood, that spotlight can feel strange. Especially for people who are always the strong ones, the givers, the fixers. They're so used to being there for others that they forget how to let others be there for them. So when their birthday comes, they downplay it. They say it's fine. They insist it doesn't matter. But inside, a quiet voice whispers, I wish someone remembered anyway. That's not ego, that's emotional truth. Being celebrated can feel awkward when you're used to being the one who celebrates others. It feels unfamiliar, even undeserved, but deep down every person still wants to be acknowledged, not for their achievements, but for existing, for surviving another year, for still trying despite everything. And that's what makes adulthood complex. We build lives that look stable on the outside, but sometimes ache quietly on the inside, because birthdays are no longer just about cake and laughter. They're about reflection, memory, and meaning. They're about reconciling who you are with who you wanted to be. So when someone says it's just another day, what they might really mean is, I'm still learning to love the person I've become. They're not numb, they're navigating, and maybe that's the real beauty of it all. Maybe growing up isn't about losing excitement, but about redefining what it means to celebrate. Maybe celebration no longer means noise, it means awareness, gratitude, presence, the ability to look at yourself and say, I'm still here, I made it another year because. That's worth celebrating, quietly, deeply, and honestly. There's a certain beauty in the way we outgrow loud celebrations and begin to find peace in stillness. When you stop expecting your birthday to feel magical, you start to notice something deeper. You realize that joy isn't something that appears once a year. It's something you've been carrying all along, quietly, in the way you live. The people who treat their birthday like a normal day aren't avoiding happiness, they're redefining it. They've stopped waiting for permission to feel good about being alive. They've stopped chasing validation from others and started creating meaning from within. And that shift from external celebration to internal acknowledgement is one of the quietest yet most powerful forms of emotional maturity. Not that they don't care, it's that their definition of celebration has evolved. Maybe it's no longer about the noise of a crowded room or the glow of candles, but the calm of a morning spent in gratitude. Maybe it's a moment of reflection on how far they've come, how much they've grown, and how many storms they've survived. That's not indifference, that's depth. But even within that calmness, there's a gentle truth. Not everyone who says it's just another day truly feels at peace with it. Some people wish they didn't have to pretend. They wish someone else would remember without being told. They wish they didn't have to downplay their feelings just to avoid disappointment. That's one of the most human contradictions we live with. The desire to seem unbothered, yet still wanting to be seen. The wish to look independent, yet still hoping someone cares enough to notice. That tug of war lives inside everyone, even the strongest ones. You see, the people who say they don't celebrate are often the same ones who celebrate everyone else. They're the quiet supporters, the ones who send messages first, remember your milestones, lift others without asking for anything in return. They're the ones who make space for everyone's emotions, but keep their own locked away. And sometimes those people forget that they too deserve light. That it's okay to be noticed, to be appreciated, to be loved without earning it, because even the calmest souls need warmth. Even the self-reliant hearts need to be seen, not for what they do, but for who they are. So if you've ever felt that quiet ache on your birthday, the kind that doesn't demand attention but hums softly inside you, know this: it's not emptiness, it's awareness. It's the reminder that connection still matters. It's your heart saying, I still want to be seen, and that's okay, that's human. Your birthday doesn't have to be grand to be meaningful. Sometimes the most powerful celebration is the one that happens within you. When you take a breath and realize you've made it through another year of lessons and losses, laughter and pain, growth and survival. That's not small, that's everything, because birthdays were never just about parties, they were about presence. Not the gifts you open, but the presence of mind that lets you feel alive, the awareness that you've become someone stronger, softer, and wiser than before. Maybe you don't need confetti anymore. Maybe you don't need people to sing or post or plan. Maybe what you need most is a quiet moment to say to yourself, I'm proud of how far I've come. The real celebration, the kind that doesn't fade when the candles go out. And if someone remembers you that day, let them. If they say your name, send you a message, or simply remind you that you matter, let them in. Don't brush it off as unnecessary. It's okay to receive warmth without earning it. It's okay to let love in, even if you've learned to live without it, because at the end of the day, treating your birthday like a normal day doesn't mean you're numb, it means you've learned. That meaning doesn't depend on noise. But even in that quiet strength, you still deserve moments of softness, a message, a hug, a reminder that your existence still ripples outward. That's what birthdays are truly about. They're not about age or attention, they're about recognition, the kind that says, you are still here. You are still growing, you are still becoming. So, if today feels ordinary, honor it anyway. Maybe you went to work, made coffee, replied to a few messages and moved on. Maybe no one called, or maybe everyone did. Either way, you're here, and that alone is enough, because growing up means learning that celebration doesn't always look like balloons. Sometimes it looks like peace, sometimes it's just one deep breath, quiet smile, a thought that says, I made it again. And maybe that's the most beautiful thing about living another year. You don't have to make a wish. You already are one, a living continuation of every version of yourself that kept going despite everything, that's worth celebrating quietly or loudly every single year.